started here. A couple of things that I always like to share before we start with the presentation. Number one, I am recording the session, so if you have to drop off early or you would like to share it with any of your colleagues, I'm going to send a follow-up email right after it ends with the recorded webinar. Number two, at the very end of my presentations, I like to save plenty of time for questions. I'm happy to answer anything that may come up, or we can just kind of have an open discussion. I would love to hear how you're going to be using Priority Matrix, what your goals kind of look like, and kind of so on and so forth from there. So feel free to either just kind of remember your questions, write them down during this webinar, or you can drop them into the chat, and at the very end, I will circle back and kind of read over those and we can answer them together. If for whatever reason during this presentation you think that there's some technical difficulties happening, maybe you can't see my screen or you're not able to hear me okay, just drop that into the chat. I'm going to keep an eye on it just to make sure that everything is going smoothly. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and get started today. So again, thank you all so much for joining me. And the topic for today's webinar is how to use Priority Matrix to its fullest potential within Microsoft Teams. So to kind of unpack that a little bit more, over the past couple of years here at Affluence, we've worked really hard to make Priority Matrix accessible through the platforms you're already using. And for a lot of organizations over the past couple of years, 2.5 years or so, we've seen a huge number of organizations switch over to start using Teams really heavily and also Outlook 365. So when we saw that transition starting, we did our best to kind of keep up with that and get Priority Matrix integrated into Microsoft Teams to make it really easily accessible, allow you to keep working in that platform while also kind of stepping up your prioritization and team collaboration aspects. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, which is all of the different ways that Priority Matrix integrates with your Microsoft Teams and kind of the best practices there. If during this webinar you feel like you could benefit from more of kind of just a basic introduction, I am going to do a little bit of that, but I have pre-recorded intro webinars on our YouTube channel, and I'm also hosting another one on Friday if you would like to join live, and that's going to kind of help you build a better foundation of the basics of getting started. So what is the Priority Matrix approach? We've done our best to provide a visual prioritization method to help you understand what your priorities are at a quick glance. I am lucky enough to talk to a lot of our first-time users, and with that, I get to hear a lot of kind of their feedback and first impressions. And one of the great things that I consistently hear from our users is how they're drawn to Priority Matrix because of its unique prioritization method using the 4 quadrants, which is definitely different than a lot of other project management solutions, which focus on just kind of a giant list format. We use the 4 quadrants, which is very unique, and we'll definitely take a closer look at that today. Priority Matrix increases visibility for your leaders by allowing you to share entire projects, maybe just the top priorities they need to look at, and giving them that access and visibility when they need it to, make sure everybody's on the same page at their convenience. Priority Matrix has also provided a central space for communication by allowing you to collaborate on either a project level or a task level, helping you stay out of those emails. So when your whole organization or entire department is in Priority Matrix with you, we've gotten really positive feedback that people are actually able to cut back on their emails 100% as long as everybody's using Priority Matrix together. Lastly, Priority Matrix has also done a really good job at helping organizations have shorter and more effective meetings. We're going to take a look at the one-on-one view today, which is designed for kind of like, one-on-one meetings. We're going to focus on that. There's a couple other things in Priority Matrix that are designed for meeting support. But again, I don't know if I'll be able to touch on that today, so definitely tune into the intro webinar on Friday to learn more about that. So what do the Office 365 integrations look like with Priority Matrix? Number one, you're able to use Priority Matrix 100% through your Microsoft Teams application. We're going to take a close look at that today. You're also able to use it with Outlook 365 for email management. We can also take a quick peek at that today. And then another really unique aspect about Priority Matrix is how deeply rooted it is with SharePoint. So a lot of people ask, well, when I upload files to my Priority Matrix, where is that stored? And we do have an option to have you store those files within SharePoint. So when you need to look at all of the files that your team has shared with you, the Priority Matrix ones are also going to be integrated into there. That's not the only integration we have with SharePoint. And again, we're going to take a look at all of that today. But one really unique thing that I do like to point out about Priority Matrix with Office 365 is that you are still able to collaborate with your external collaborators through Priority Matrix in Office 365. If that's something that piques your interest, let me know. I'm happy to touch on that. It's kind of a whole topic in itself that I do have a separate webinar on, because it is such a big need, which is, external collaboration while also, trying to stay out of your email. So we can touch on that. Would love to hear if that is of interest to you, and I can always do another webinar on that topic. All right, so what are the best practices with Priority Matrix for Microsoft Teams? And everything that I'm showing you, I think it's just like the next, it looks like 4 to 5 slides are just a quick preview, and then I'm going to actually hop into the full application and do a live demo, but I just kind of want to gear you up for, the basics of what we're looking at. So number one, we do have a full featured web application integrated into Microsoft Teams, which is what I have on my screen here today, and we are going to take a closer look at this. The next thing that we're going to look at is how you can use Priority Matrix directly through your Teams chat. On the left-hand side, we have a picture of the one-on-one view, which is designed for more effective and shorter meetings with a specific person. And then just to the right of that, I'm showing you how you can actually access your projects through a Teams chat. Again, just a quick glimpse. You don't need to understand it fully right now. I'm going to circle back and touch on all of these. The next thing that we're going to look at is action cards for context. So when you're chatting with somebody in Microsoft Teams and you're like, hey, what's the status of that action item that we talked about? You can actually integrate that, that task right there into your chat, so you can have all the context you need without even having to leave the chat. Priority Matrix also allows you to prioritize a comment within a chat or a channel. I'm going to really dive in deeper for that again with during my presentation, but just kind of a quick glimpse there. You can also use Priority Matrix through your Teams channels for posting connectors or notifications, while also accessing those specific projects for each channel you're working in. Lastly, you're also going to be able to view all of your emails, calendar events, and files directly through Priority Matrix for Microsoft Teams, and that touches really heavily on the SharePoint aspect of this. So without further ado, let's go ahead and actually kind of break off and take a look at the Priority Matrix app itself. So thank you for staying tuned. Hopefully that was kind of a helpful intro for, setting the stage for what we're going to be looking at in the next, 5 to 10 minutes or so. And so, yeah, let's go ahead and get started. So here on my screen, this is my Priority Matrix app, and it is integrated into Microsoft Teams. So this is the most upfront, probably most common place for people to use Priority Matrix, and likely where you will be spending a lot of your time once you do adopt PM into Teams. So I have Priority Matrix open on the left-hand side, and then I always suggest pinning it open just so it's super easily accessible for you. For those of you that may be seeing Priority Matrix for the very first time, I want to explain that Priority Matrix creates a system for you and your teammates to track similar priorities. You're able to share these projects with each other, where you can actually go in and you can delegate tasks. You're able to communicate. You can share progress updates, set reminders, set deadlines, anything you need to do with your teammates, you're able to do directly within Priority Matrix through Teams. Now, that was my 30-minute intro to, or rather 30-second intro to Priority Matrix. Again, if you're looking for a more in-depth introduction, join my webinar on Friday, where I spend 30 minutes just breaking down all the basics of getting started. I wish I had time to do that today. Unfortunately, though, this webinar does need to stay kind of on topic and just focus on using Priority Matrix in all the different places through Microsoft Teams. So that's what we'll kind of branch off into now. So when you use the full-featured Priority Matrix integration through Microsoft Teams, you're able to do everything, including generate reports, work with your teammates, anything you need to do through PM, you can absolutely do through this full-fledged web application. Some of the there's kind of a lot to unpack here on the screen. If there's questions about, more specifically what Priority Matrix can do, definitely write those down and I'm happy to answer those for you at the end. I'm going to kind of transition into a different screen here, which is focusing on how you can use Priority Matrix through a Microsoft Teams chat. So over the past couple of years, like I mentioned at the start, I have had the opportunity to talk to a lot of organizations who aren't only new to Priority Matrix, but are new to Microsoft Teams as well. And I can guarantee this resonates with at least a couple of you on this meeting today, which is the fact that people constantly tell me, hey, Microsoft Teams is working really well for us to communicate, schedule meetings, share files. But a common challenge that people have with Teams is if you're in a chat or if you're in a channel with several people, these conversations get lost. So if I'm talking to somebody and we're chatting back and forth with a million comments, and then we pause and come back to it and have another conversation later that day, these comments here are basically lost in space and, completely forgotten about. So people have challenges with tasks falling through the cracks, not being able to share status updates easily, and just really no visibility to see, what the latest is on those tasks that were discussed. So look no further or worry no longer, because what you're going to be able to do now that you're using Priority Matrix with Teams is when you're chatting with your teammates and something comes up and you think, hey, that is great, we really need to keep track of this and I need to share progress updates on it, what you can simply do is hover over that comment, click on these three dots, cruise to the more actions, and click on create item. So what we're doing here is we're taking this comment, we are prioritizing it into one of our Priority Matrix projects, which we very quickly took a look at the start of this demo. You can schedule your deadline. So just a quick note about this. For me, if I'm thinking, okay, this is a really important task, it doesn't necessarily have a due date, but I don't want to forget about it, I'll plug in that due date as a little reminder. So the system can do its job and remind me when I need to circle back to it. So where did this comment just go? It went into my Priority Matrix project that I intentionally chose that my teammates do have visibility to. I'll circle back to that in just a minute, but the idea is this comment is now prioritized. We can have a specific discussion about this task that we now created, set deadlines, delegate it. It's kind of thrown into the collaborative system now with my teammates, and it's no longer just left as kind of a, miscellaneous comment that could very easily be forgotten about. So that is absolutely best practice number one for using Priority Matrix through your chat. I get really good feedback about that, and I would absolutely suggest testing it out. It allows you to continue to use what Teams has provided, which is a chatting platform, but kind of step it up a little bit further to, be more prioritized and actually collaborate on these tasks. The next best practice that I want to show you is still using Priority Matrix through the chat here. But what I've done is I've pinned the Priority Matrix one-on-one view into this specific chat. For those of you that are still getting used to Teams, just so you know, you can click on this little plus icon it might go a little bit slow for me, you can click on Priority Matrix or any of the other systems you may be using where you can begin to kind of customize the chats that you're working in. What's cool about using the Priority Matrix one-on-one view is you could even go to every single person that you have a chat with in Teams and pin their one-on-one view open. So now what happens for all of you managers out there, if you feel like you're constantly getting into meetings with your teammate to get these status updates and have these one-on-one reviews, this is going to be most likely your saving grace, because you can now, like I said, add this to every single chat you have. The system remembers the last person you chose. So as soon as I pick this demo user, if I click somewhere else and I jump back to it, the system will automatically generate my one-on-one with this person. What I'm able to see now is all of my shared priorities across all of our projects relevant to myself and this one person. So again, for all of you managers who are creating tasks and delegating them to your teammates, and then you just need to see the status on all those high priority items, one-on-one view has you covered. It automatically creates that agenda for you. Another really wonderful aspect of this is if I click on Add Shared Task, I can actively prioritize a task. So we'll just say review webinar notes, kind of random, but easy enough. And we're going to say due in 8 hours. Automatically shared, I can add all of my item notes. Again, prioritize it into the correct project, quadrant, hit add. We're going to see that this is now it's added to our shared priority list. So again, if there's a system that's going to make sure nothing slips through the cracks, it's this one-on-one view. Because I have my due date, it's now a shared priority. So if I make a status update, my manager would automatically be notified. It's here in this agenda. It's going to stay here. So next week when we connect, I can go through all of the shared tasks that we recently created. At the bottom, this is touching on the SharePoint integration. It's going to show you every single shared email that you have with this person, any shared file, and all of your upcoming meetings that you're both involved in. So if you're looking for contextual details to have an effective meeting, this view is going to be your go-to and your best option. Lastly, using Priority Matrix through your chats, I also want to point out that if you feel like you're constantly working on a project with another person or constantly referring to it, just go ahead and pin that Priority Matrix project into your chat, where now I can jump to it really quickly without having to go to the full Priority Matrix application. And might I add that any status update I share here or any change I make is going to sync automatically back to my full Priority Matrix app. So don't worry about having to make updates in multiple places. Okay, kind of pausing there to give you a minute to write down your questions and kind of digest all of that. Moving on to what I wanted to show you, which is now focusing on using Priority Matrix within your channels. So in these channels, I often see people breaking it up by teams, by departments, by projects, whatever it might be. But it's likely a group of people using these channels together. And more common than not, when Priority Matrix is adopted, it kind of follows the same pattern as the channels in terms of who's working on which projects together. So very similar to what I showed you in the chat, you can pin those relevant projects right to the top of your channel. So as you need to share these project and task updates, you don't need to go back to the full Priority Matrix app. You can do all of that right here. A very common question that I get about Priority Matrix is notifications. So you are going to get notifications directly through the Priority Matrix application, and you can refer to those 100% just up here through this guide. But for those of you who spend most of your time working through channels, which I know a lot of us do, a lot of the times we do like to see notifications coming right through this channel, so we don't feel like we need to keep hopping back to this guy up here and making sure we're not missing anything. This is called a priority matrix connector card. And basically what it does is this is a notification. And what I've done is I've gone into this specific channel, clicked on the 3 dots, and I've selected connectors. Hopefully this doesn't take too long to show you, but what I like to do is I go to configured. If you haven't configured anything yet, you can do it through search, type in priority matrix and start your configuration there. But then what we can do is we can basically hit configure. And now what you're doing is you're saying, I want to see notifications for these specific items, maybe these specific projects. Keep me updated about this type of status update. And you can set up multiple connectors. As you saw, I had 2 configured. So now, in the specific setup that I have, if anybody in this project makes a change to it, and I'm going to do that right here, we'll just say new test item due in 4 days. When I add that task, again, any type of change that's made, because that's how I have my connector set up, it's going to post directly to this channel. So here it is. So now anybody who's working in this channel at this time is going to see these status updates. Again, here at Priority Matrix, we are doing our best to keep everybody on the same page and make those status updates easy to see and accessible no matter what. These connectors are going to be your saving grace for that. I think that covers what I wanted to show you through the channels. Again, don't forget, you can also pin those projects up here, just like we did in the chat, as many as you need. You're not limited to just one. You can pin as many as you need. One thing that I did forget to show you in the chat, which you can actually do this in the channels as well, is utilizing what we call action cards. So if I'm chatting with my manager, I'm like, hey, can we talk about the latest like software update or something, whatever it might be, I can go in here, fix my little typo, I'd send that comment to this person, and then maybe there's a priority matrix action item that I would like to refer to specifically. I clicked on the 4 quadrants here, which represents priority matrix. Here's the item that I just created, so this is a great example. Click on it, hit send, and now I'm referencing this item to everybody in this chat, everybody in the channel, if I were to send it there. Now everybody has this contextual evidence. We're on the same page. We can talk about it, or I can even click open item and it will redirect me to this item in the project. So again, these are called action cards. The idea is just to get right to the point, talk about what needs to be discussed, and have your priority matrix items to back up that conversation. Lastly, and I promise this is the last thing that I'll show you, and then we'll open it up for questions. Going back to the full priority matrix application. So I wanted to show you just really quickly, let's see, where is that item that I'm looking for? I'm going to go to the feed to find the comment that I prioritized so I can show it to you all. Let's see. Here it is. So if you remember when we were in the chat, I showed you how you can prioritize a comment. I just wanted to show you really quickly what that's going to look like for you. So here it is. It adds this little blurb icon just so you can find it really easily. And again, now what I may be able to do is I can actually delegate this to somebody. I can say, hey, can you look into this for me? Whatever I need to do, as you can tell, it's now prioritized. I can delegate it, really easy to go about my business, better than having to dig through my chat to find it. What I wanted to show you before I got sidetracked with that was lastly, a little bit more about the SharePoint integrations. Here in my search view, I can see every single thing in Priority Matrix, which is great because I can type in like a keyword and it's going to show me anything relevant to that in my Priority Matrix. But at the bottom, a very special integration with Teams and SharePoint is the ability to search through all of your emails, all of your meetings, and all of your files that are stored on SharePoint. So, the idea of having to jump to multiple platforms to find what you're looking for is now a thing of the past because I'm searching through all of our SharePoint data. And for those of you who are familiar with that means, that's where all of your team's information is stored. So we're searching through a huge variety of different platforms, all in just one place. And I can tell you this for sure. There's actually no other way to do this kind of search perspective without using the priority matrix search view. It's very unique to this and very helpful. If something stands out and you're like, okay, this is a really important meeting, for example, I would like to send it to priority matrix so I can prioritize it and then discuss it with my teammates. Any of this information here can be prioritized immediately. So I know that there's bound to be questions at this point. It's kind of a fun topic for me to go over because I know it's something that interests people, but a lot of the times in demos, I don't have as much time as I want to go over it just because, it took up 30 minutes to go over all of that. It's really specific, but also really great to know because it can, really elevate how you use priority matrix. So, with all that being said, enough of me talking. I would love to hear any questions that you all might have. So, I'm going to keep an eye on the chat if you want to drop it in there. I'm also going to keep an eye on your reactions. If somebody raises their hand or, sends any type of emoji, I can take you off mute and I can actually answer your questions for you. If there's no questions coming up right here, that's, pretty normal. People typically don't really know what to ask until they get in there and start playing around with it. So that's perfectly fine. I do want to remind you one more time that I have a bunch more webinars scheduled for this week. Most importantly, the introduction. I feel like that could help a lot of us on the meeting today, just kind of get our footing and understand a little bit more about the general usage of priority matrix. With all of this being said, I am going to stop